Do you want to start your journey as a pro wrestler? Go from backyards to big leagues to main eventing Madison Square Garden? We'll take it from someone just starting out. Me, Gabe Sayers, the man with a death wish. It's hard. Very hard. Yet very, very possible. In this video, I will be explaining early steps you can take to begin a pro wrestling career or journey. And I'm making this video because as I, looked up this topic, as I went on YouTube and searched for this topic, I didn't see a lot of results that was really recent. A lot of results I was finding were 2, 3, 5 years old. And I wanted to be able to give my perspective as someone who's just starting in the wrestling business, but someone that is getting pro trained, and give my advice and some of my perspective on easy and early ways to kind of get your head in the door for professional wrestling. The art of pro wrestling is painful. With having many different varieties of pro wrestling, you can find yourself lost and really not knowing where you want to go or even start. Pro wrestling is home to many different styles like deathmatch, lucha libre, and strong style. This also includes Turkish oil wrestling, which is personally my favorite, as I love to Turkish oil wrestle with the boys while we're butt naked. My girlfriend doesn't really like it though. Too many dicks or something. In wrestling, you have to learn how to forcefully get thrown against a mat in that wrestling ring, which, let's make that clear, it's not a bouncy trampoline. The wrestling ring hurts. These bumps you see wrestlers taking on TV, these are not painless bumps. Even though they've done it so many times, it is still that same impact on their back, and people have only so many bumps. Next time you watch a wrestling match, truly appreciate something like a top rope superplex, because those are truly some of the most painful bumps you can take because of just how high up you're coming from and how much force is just smashing down upon your spine in that back. Now, a good place to learn how to get your ass kicked is pro wrestling school. In wrestling school, you need to have good teachers that know what they're talking about and have actual experience in the field. Along with that, they also need to know how to teach people. You could be a 30-year veteran of the business and have a great career, but if you're terrible at teaching people, your students will get nowhere. You need to find a wrestling school that's willing to teach you and able to teach you in ways that you can understand. But there are things that you can actually prepare for before even locating or looking for a wrestling school. While pro wrestling is no longer just a body sport, having a good physique is always an advantage in pro wrestling. While having a good physique is not 100% necessary, it's something that could give you an advantage over the classmate next to you. And if you can't, God forbid, get that physique, there is nothing wrong with that. But you should always be in good shape as a professional wrestler. Being in good shape means having stamina, strength, power, things like that, things that you could easily attain at the gym. You don't always have to be the skinniest or the most buff or lose the most weight, but it could literally just be about having some stamina and having some strength that you can use and throw around in the ring. Doing this before your wrestling school can put you higher up than some of the other students that are coming in with you, as they might just be starting to hit the gym. But if you can hit the gym earlier and get started now, almost a year or maybe 2 years before you even consider hitting your pro wrestling school, you'll already be at such an advantage. Another big thing to have before your first day of pro wrestling school is simply a passion for professional wrestling. You will never, ever make it big as a professional wrestler if you do not have passion. People that take wrestling for granted and see wrestling as just some sort of job and don't have fun with it are people who don't really succeed in wrestling. You need to have passion. You have to want to become a professional wrestler. You have to want it more than so many other people to make it to the big leagues. And there's nothing wrong with not making it to the big leagues and maybe being just an independent wrestler for your entire career. But you have to want that. You have to have that passion, that burn, that fire to do that. It takes a lot, and it is physically and mentally exhausting, but at the end of the day, if you have a passion and a love for the art of professional wrestling, then I believe you can do it, because I know I can. With both of these things in mind, and now that you really have found your passion for professional wrestling, and maybe you've started hitting the gym, maybe not, both are fine, you have to find a wrestling school, and results are going to come up with very interesting results because it's not just pro wrestling schools. These are also amateur wrestling schools, and you could find like high schools and stuff like that. So how do you narrow it down to just pro wrestling schools in your area? Now, I'm on the East Coast personally, so I am lucky enough to have a lot of wrestling schools near me. And now even though all of these not even though that not all of these are professional wrestling schools, I know of a lot of wrestling schools near me. And that's not just from Google and looking for schools on Google, but that's from marketing myself. That's going on social medias and asking other professional wrestlers that are from my area questions. There's nothing wrong with asking questions, and if you get left unread, you get left unread. It's smart to try to make some connections out there. Try to have conversations with people and try to figure out where you can find a school. Now, luckily for me, if you look right here, if you are in this area right here, look, you have Create a Pro Wrestling. That is pro wrestling school right there. But if you take something else like the Dynamic Wrestling Academy, I'm not exactly sure that's the wrestling academy you're looking for. That looks more like amateur wrestling. You have to be able to do your research. That means going and looking around on Google, or, contacting other wrestlers that are from your area and looking for schools that you could go to. Personally, I got lucky enough and I found Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling. Paradise Alley Pro Wrestling is the wrestling school I currently train at in East Haven, Connecticut. Paradise Alley I found because as I was going to independent shows and showing my passion by trying to support any sort of wrestling I could find, I asked people that were local to my area what wrestling schools they knew of and what ones they went to. And Paradise Alley came up on the list. After doing some research, I found out that this place is only about 45 minutes from my house, and now I go every Monday as I train. From there, the fun really begins when you find a wrestling school, it's time for you to contact the wrestling school, find openings, look for times that you can come in, just meet the trainers, meet some of the other students there. Don't just immediately dive in once you find a wrestling school local to your area. You want to quality check the wrestling school, and as you may not know exactly what to be looking for, try to find reviews, ask other wrestlers who's trained there or trained locally around that area what they think about that wrestling school. Make sure that you're not putting your hard-earned money into a school that isn't going to give you the learning and the wrestling experience that you need to become a professional wrestler. You have to be able to go to that school, be able to visit, walk into the ring without having to pay. You have to be able to trust your trainer, as this person's going to be critical to the growth of you as a wrestler. Another thing you're going to need for that wrestling school is money at the end of the day. Money is not grown on trees or made on trees, but you need money to be able to pay for wrestling school. Personally, at my wrestling school, I pay over $2,000 for my total tuition, but it is a one-time payment that I have to pay. Wrestling schools do their payments differently, but you have to have some sort of monetary budget to be able to get into wrestling, because after you pay off your wrestling school, you need gear, you need knee pads, you need kick pads. There's so many other things that you might need that you might have to pay for. Gas money. You got to make sure you have a working vehicle. That you have to make sure that you're able to make money while you're going to wrestling school. Graduating or just completing your training at a wrestling school isn't just going to immediately pay you or get you into the independent wrestling circuit. There's so many other steps you need to take from there. Pro wrestling is an art form. Love for wrestling is something that can fuel a wrestling career for you for decades. My journey is just starting, and my name is Gabe Sayers. Please consider subscribing, liking, and I'll be answering all questions you have on Discord or in the YouTube comments. Go out there, go get trained, and good fucking luck. Wrestling is a very long journey, and obviously I am still starting off. I'm not a big name in wrestling, but I know I struggled in the beginning to even find a wrestling school, to understand really what even a wrestling school was and shit like that. So I hope this does help. Any questions I will answer, and I will be starting a podcast with other independent pro wrestlers coming up very soon, so they'll also be able to answer your questions because they will most likely be much more experienced than me. Thank you, stay safe, and subscribe.